Cumnock No. 1 Colliery is a former Elcom mine 25 kilometres north of Singleton. Last night, Council gave the approval for a 10 million tonne open-cut coal mine extension, guaranteeing the employment of the 140 workers. But the new mine site is so close to the New England Highway, the main inland route to the north, that during blasting the road will have to be closed to traffic, on average once every 2 months, for about 25 minutes time. To get approval to work the area, Cumnock No. 1 Colliery will implement a traffic management plan, giving highway travellers ample warning of the dates of closure. In an extreme emergency, say with an ambulance, the mines will provide a deviation for vehicles to get through. If things proceed as planned, the new mine should be underway within 2 months. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
A cluster of 3 heritage-listed buildings, probably the most familiar on the rambling site fronting Merriweather Street, will be handed over to the Honeysuckle Development Corporation. The buildings are considered to have showpiece potential for redevelopment and may eventually house markets. The locomotive boiler shop, blacksmiths and erecting shops were the hub of activity in the yard from the 1870s to the late 1920s, the machine shop in continuous use until just a few years ago. Although an eerie quiet prevails about the yard these days, the buildings are still heritage valued for their architectural design and the level of sophistication to which they are equipped and operated. The machine shop was a provincial centre for locomotive overhauls and outlived the steam era, while just next door blacksmiths toiled over an earthen floor for more than a century. A sympathetic renovation is already well underway on the oldest building on the site, the District Engineer's Cottage. The last of the State Rail staff still at Honeysuckle are being transferred to a new depot at Hamilton and will have vacated the site by September.
What's seen as offensive in the eyes of one moviegoer is the practice of free speech to another. Having to walk the tightrope between those two views is David Haynes, the Deputy Chief Censor of the Film and Literature Classification Office. Mr Haynes sees up to 600 movies and videos a year to give them a classification from G to R, but few end up being rejected altogether.
Generally speaking, we would probably knock back about half a dozen cinema films. They tend to be foreign films which feature sexual violence, and probably 70 or 80 videotapes.
Mr Haynes told the Newcastle Business Club the office tries to reflect community attitudes when it classifies a film, and it's obvious what the public isn't too keen to watch at the moment.
Violence is certainly the greatest concern that people have, and we're very mindful of that when we're assigning classifications to films and videos, followed by language and sex, which don't seem to be of quite such concern to people.
To help the viewing public distinguish between films, a new classification has been invented to augment the M category. It's called MA,
which is restricted to people over the age of 15 and will include all those films that used to be at the upper end of the old M category. And basically no one under the age of 15 should have access to those films unless they are in the company of a parent or guardian.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
First on the paddock, competing for the Swan Shield, were the under-15s from Cardiff in green and yellow and Glendale Technology High in black and white. Glendale got the break with effective drive from ruckman Gregor Haas, but Cardiff staged a remarkable recovery to even the scores by the end of the scheduled 4 15-minute quarters. An extra 10 minutes were called for. Glendale reasserted its dominance, scoring another 1-goal 3 to end 5-11 to 5-2. Then came the seniors in the Lions Cup, with Warners Bay in black and yellow pitted against Whitebridge High in green. Whitebridge dominated early, but had difficulty splitting the big sticks before finally breaking through. Warners Bay made a quick reply and, despite trailing for most of the game, kicked a goal right on the siren to take out the match by just 1 point, 7-6-48 to 5-17-47. Whitebridge paying dearly for its early inaccuracy. The Glendale under-15s and the Warners Bay seniors will now play North Coast sides early next term in the next tiers of the statewide competitions.
While Newcastle has been known as the Steel City, the Federation of Industrial, Manufacturing and Engineering Employees is wondering for how much longer. The union has again raised its long-standing concerns that BHP's Newcastle Steelworks will be downgraded to a mini-mill at the end of the decade, cutting the workforce from 3,400 to about 600. The union's fears are based on recent reported comments by BHP's Chief Executive John Prescott that a mini-mill is a clear indication of the way forward for Newcastle. BHP spokesman Carl Kitchen says the Newcastle Steelworks is midway through a $50 million overhaul of its 2 blast furnaces to keep the facility operating.
The work is being done to extend the lives of those 2 blast furnaces to allow them to operate into the second half of this decade.
We do recognise that BHP are committed until the end of the decade, and they've certainly spent a lot of money at the Newcastle Steelworks to achieve that. But as I said, it's after that is what we're concerned about.
To try to get some long-term guarantees, the union is contacting local, state and federal politicians to set up a meeting with Prime Minister Paul Keating.
If the BHP shut up shop or downsize to the extent of a mini-mill, it's going to mean very much less employment, and that's going to have a multiplier effect in across Newcastle and the Hunter.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Ten-year-old Elisa Turner was involved in a frightening crash. She was a passenger in a car hit by a truck. She spent 5 weeks in hospital with a broken leg, a fractured pelvis and face lacerations. It's accidents such as this that a trauma database follows through, doctors taking detailed information from the time of the incident to leaving the hospital.
It will give them a very solid base to work from in terms of reviewing what sort of injuries they have to treat, how effectively they are treating those injuries.
Westmead Hospital in Sydney show of burns injuries through its database and hence invested more money in burns-related medicines and equipment. Doctors even believe the information can lead to the prevention of accidents, for example, on our roads.
I think it will give some demographic information that may well be useful in modifying the sort of conditions that people drive under in this area.
John Hunter takes around 2,000 adult accident victims of some kind each year. Its estimated motor vehicle accidents account for around 70% of those cases. The new database, funded with $104,000 from the Motor Accidents Authority, will pinpoint exact details, giving the hospital a link for future planning. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
For the area.
Thanks, Judith, and I'll certainly do that, and I'll do more than that in the return to Parliament. They have what they call member statements, and even though I'll write to the Minister in the interim.
Considered usually to be a picturesque stretch of the Pacific Highway, the roadside at Johns River was today splotched with some of the 27,000 litres of petrol that gushed from an overturned tanker yesterday. Clean-up crews, including workers from the affected company Mobil, mopped up the petrol and prevented it from seeping into nearby waterways. Environment Protection Authority representatives inspected the clean-up, saying that a quick response has prevented severe environmental damage.
I'm in particular very pleased with the response of the Fire Brigade and the RTA. They were apparently on the scene very quickly and were able to contain this spilled petrol.
A Mobil spokesman says the company is taking soil samples and monitoring the site over the next 4 days. This latest Pacific Highway spill and a fatal tanker crash further south at Wootton last week have raised the question of the safety of carrying dangerous goods on a major road. A spokesman for the New South Wales Road Transport Association says while the spills are regrettable, there's no escaping the fact that fuel has to be carried by road to many Australian communities where freight by rail or sea is simply not an option. But Newcastle company Banlaw says more could be done to prevent major spills. The company has developed a refuelling system using valves that it says can't accidentally fly open and so would eliminate major and highly dangerous tanker spills. But Banlaw says to be effective, this so-called dry braking system would have to be implemented across the board.
Until you actually change the technology overall in one go, it's very difficult to install new technology to stop that spillage. It has to come from government intervention.
Sinbad's Seafood Restaurant and Bojangles Night Spot have operated at the picturesque Queen's Wharf site since 1988. This week, though, evidence the company is in financial trouble, with the appointment of receivers Ernst & Young.
The State Bank New South Wales appointed me on Wednesday. The company ran into some financial difficulties and my job is to come in and manage the operations pending a sale of the business.
The good news for staff and patrons is that the restaurants and entertainment will continue. Advertisements will be placed in local and national papers to find a new owner. Greg Lloyd from Ernst & Young says some buyers have already expressed interest in the site.
The price is yet to be determined. I'll be working that out with some valuers over the next week or so.
Some suppliers are owed money. Greg Lloyd says their position will be known within the next month. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
It could have been anybody who got in Michael Cooper's way one night last October. Cooper and another man had left a hotel after a drinking binge and banged randomly along the walls and doors of Melbourne Street, East Maitland. 21-year-old Adam Hartwell was unlucky enough to open his door. He was punched in the face and fell, cracking his skull on a concrete step. Michael Cooper then stomped on Hartwell's head. Doctors clearly identified the footprints. Adam Hartwell died a week later in hospital.
He knew what he was doing. He was very drunk, but he knew what he was doing, and his mate tried to talk him out of it.
In sentencing Cooper in Newcastle Supreme Court last Friday, Justice Studdert doubted whether Cooper would have beaten a murder charge had he been tried, but accepted his guilty plea to manslaughter. Weighed against Cooper's substantial history of compulsive aggressive behaviour and previous record of assaults, Justice Studdert considered an absence of intent and the influence of drugs and alcohol on Cooper. He sentenced the 21-year-old to 5 years jail, backdated to when Cooper was arrested last October. Not enough, according to family and many in the community. Member for Maitland Peter Blackmore sought a review of the sentence and was informed this afternoon that the Director of Public Prosecutions will examine the court papers.
Whether it be manslaughter or murder, but I believe the community are offended at the fact that a 5-year non-parole period has been issued in this case. That, to me, is grounds enough for people to lose faith in the judicial system.
It was the latest in a spate of after-hours smash and grab raids on Newcastle's Central Coast and Lake Macquarie Bowling Club poker machines. East Maitland has been hit twice. Both times the thieves knocked out a window pane, then working quickly with the alarms ringing, rifled as many of the gold coin poker machine cash boxes as they could. The thieves got out in minutes, showering a trail of dollar coins as they ran. This time the raid netted more than $3,000, but it was once too often for the club's management. Security cameras will be installed, coins will be deposited into night safes.
So if they want the dollars from East Maitland Bowling Club, they're going to have to bring more equipment and spend more time here because they'll have to get into our holding safe to get the dollars.
Mark Glanville was playing his normally tough defensive game when he copped an elbow to the throat from Derek McVie. Gasping for breath, he left the field, doctors confirming he had a large amount of internal bleeding and bruising in his throat. This afternoon he underwent a CAT scan to determine the extent of the damage. He now has an agonising wait for the specialist verdict. One Knight who expects to be back next week, Tony Butterfield. Just before yesterday's game, he withdrew with an Achilles tendon injury.
It wasn't quite 100%, and in the big games you can't really go in underdone.
Butterfield and a group of teammates spent today filming a commercial and are confident the Knights are back to bread and butter football. Halfback Jason Martin added the extra filling with some well-placed field kicks yesterday, keeping Balmain pinned in their half.
Well, we knew that Balmain liked to throw the ball around, and all we had to do is keep pressure on them, and we knew that the mistakes would come our way.
5'8" Matthew Johns continues to carve a niche for himself in first grade with some good footwork and accurate passing.
I've sort of got a bit more experience there now, and I feel I'm a bit used to the pace, and I'm enjoying it.
And talk today that a Balmain player who sat out yesterday's game because of a headache went to an aftermatch function and had a smashing good time. Police were called, but no action was taken. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
Lake Macquarie tourist officer Michael Ridley has just returned from the Sydney travel show at Darling Harbour, where the Newcastle and Lake Macquarie exhibit won the Australian Travel Industry Award for the best stand.
We were competing against all the international markets, the airlines, all the domestic markets, are normally recognised tourism icons, Port Douglas, Blue Mountains, whatever it may be, and we still managed to pull it off.
Around 5,000 people passed through the exhibition during the 3 days it operated. Mr Ridley believes it's important that Newcastle and Lake Macquarie stop seeing themselves as separate entities and instead concentrate on selling the area they both belong to.
What we've got to do is sell our product to satisfy market demand. Now, I'm afraid the market doesn't base where it's going to go on a local government boundary. It bases on the experiences and what it can enjoy in that particular area. And I think it's just common sense that we do work together and work together more effectively.
"22-year-old sprinter Paul Henderson was flat out this afternoon. Training 6 and 7 days a week can take its toll. An hour with the masseur can iron out some sore muscles. The Newcastle athlete leaves for Europe on the weekend, taking on the world's glamour sprinters.
So the Michael Johnsons, the Carl Lewises, the Linford Christies, and I'm up against the big boys now, so this is going to be the real test.
The World Championships start in August in Germany, Paul running in the 200 metres. His best time is 20.35 seconds, just 0.6 of a second off world record pace. But he'll be happy to make the finals. In training, Paul has been specialising in power work and time trials, often teaming up with Darren Clark. 30 Aussies are in the team, running in arguably the number 2 competition behind the Olympics in the world.
"200 hardy spectators watched the clash. Souths were the first to post points with this penalty conversion from 5/8 Brett Botham. Soon after, Botham scored a great individual try, beating 3 players and running 50 metres to cross for Souths. He also converted the try from the sideline, taking the score to 8-0 within the opening 15 minutes of the game. By half-time, the score had jumped to 24-0. South's dominance and class over Waratah, typified by this hot potato try just before the break. Waratah rallied in the second half but couldn't stop the Souths outfit, who won the game convincingly 42-10. Botham was man of the match, scoring 2 tries and 5 conversions, taking his season tally to more than 100 points. The win put Souths on equal second place on the ladder. With just 5 more games to play, Waratah will need a string of victories to sneak into the top 5.
In the past few months, the Civic Theatre has undergone a dramatic transformation.
We're excited by some of the finishes and some craftspeople we've been able to source to achieve the 1929 finishes.
A team of 65 is now working on those finishes, and despite the enormity of the task, there's plenty of attention to detail. The scaffolding is expected to come down in late August, with the official opening set down for November the 13th. But on Sunday, there'll be lots to see.
The final details of how the walls were originally painted, now that can be seen on the back walls of the auditorium and on the side walls. There's a lovely painting technique that's come through, and it's multicoloured, and that has restored the appearance of the theatre. The restoration of the domes is another item that is nearing completion. The restoration of the proscenium arch has just started, although the main section at the top of the arch is nearing completion.
At councils across the region, workers are still coming to terms with the ramifications of the new Local Government Act. What's in a name? Well, according to some members of council, everything. One change that's causing some concern is the fact that from today, aldermen will be called councillors.
I would rather be called alderman, I would. I think it's a title that goes with local government. It goes with the Westminster system, and that's where local government derived from.
And that sentiment is echoed by the Lord Mayor of Newcastle, Councillor John McNaughton.
Oh, I just think of the name alderman as a very prestigious, ancient, customary name, and it ought to have been maintained.
The name Shire President has also been changed. They'll now be called mayors. But the changes go beyond titles to the very heart of council operations. The reforms include a requirement by council to provide an environmental audit, more regular reporting to the community through financial reports, the recruitment and promotion of staff on merit, and also for council and committee meetings to be made more open to the public. The Lord Mayor is outraged by the requirement that council hold a by-election when a councillor resigns or dies. He says under the new Act, Newcastle Council would have been forced to spend $500,000 on 2 by-elections this term.
Because of the tragic death of Alderman Geddes and one by the resignation of Alderman Saunders. That would have cost us $500,000.
The Lord Mayor believes councils should have been consulted more before the state government introduced the changes. Kate Midgley is good at blowing out candles. After all, she's been doing it for more than a century. Born on the 1st of July 1886, Mrs Midgley today celebrated her 107th birthday at St Joseph's Nursing Home just north of Newcastle. Everyone from her 77-year-old daughter Phyllis to her 3-month-old great-great-great-grandson Jared were on hand today to sing happy birthday to the grand old lady everyone calls Grandma. 5 generations have evolved since Mrs Midgley immigrated from England in 1927. She spent most of her 66 years in Australia between Tamworth and Newcastle. According to her daughter, the secret to Mrs Midgley's long and healthy life is...
She doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, she's always led a good life, a good healthy life, and she doesn't paint her face.
The march of time has caught up with the University of Newcastle. It finds itself top-heavy with senior academics, dragging the wages bill into the red.
It's not sudden cause for alarm, but it has, in some sense, crept up on us, perhaps one should say.
The salaries bill is $54 million a year, well above the $31 million prescribed by the Department of Education and Training. The university is offering senior staff voluntary retirement packages, but would aim at keeping up its complement by employing more junior lecturers.
There is no question whatsoever of wholesale laying offs, no laying offs. If we can reach agreement with persons to go of their own wish, then that will happen. Otherwise, we will have other plans afoot.
Other options could include trying to make more money to cover expenses.
We could earn more money through full fee-paying overseas students and also through the rich consultative and research abilities of the university.
A playwright or promoter may have rubbed their hands together at the sight of Novocastrians queuing at the Civic. A few old show tunes set the mood for today's reminiscent ramble through what was considered the queen of the city's theatres.
So I was a lolly boy back in the 50s, and we thought the Civic Theatre was it.
Beyond the scaffolding and barricades, an Art Deco era is being rekindled, new life being licked on with fresh paint and spackle. But the $9 million refurbishment is more than just skin deep. Stage and seating has been rearranged. Some tried the yet-to-be-installed fully vented seating. Others were more appreciative of other creature comforts.
They're increasing the number of toilets, and there used to be queues a mile long, and it used to be very cold too in the winter.
It was the inaugural festival of paintings and performers in the park and a collage of cultures from Aboriginal to junior gypsy on roller skates at Newcastle's harbour foreshore. Poets penned and performed their work as the long, the short and the tall of creative countercultures passed by. The atmosphere was catching. Looks like the pots and pans at home will cop a workout after this performance by percussion group Bangers and Smash.
Today's game was vitally important for Waratah if they were to remain in touch with the competition leaders, but looking at their defence, you never would have known. Wests were able to run rampant, starting try-scoring opportunities from nearly everywhere on the ground. However, it wasn't all blossoms for Wests. Waratah was still able to score 12 points after half-time. And if West's goal kicker had brought the proper boots, the score could have been much, much bigger. Cheryl Salisbury and Bridget Starr are the best of friends, teammates, but at the same time opponents. Cheryl plays for local team Adamstown, while Bridget is the backbone of the Cardiff team. Last weekend they were up against each other, and while the competition was spirited, they still managed to laugh and remain friends at the end of the game. Next Saturday they jet out for Denmark to play in the Dana Cup for the Australian under-19s.
Well, some of the teams are professional, and there's a team from the USA which won the Women's World Cup, so it's going to be fairly tough.
They're confident, though, the Aussies won't be out-muscled.
If you pull back, you'll get hurt. You've got to get in there and give it all you got.
Both girls believe there will be more than just supporters in the stands. They hope their performance will attract the attention of a European talent scout, and just maybe that could lead to a professional contract.